26 million, bro. That's equal here. So you think that this 40 whatever million came from all of Hearthstone, all of Overwatch, all of Diablo, all of Heroes of the Storm, and then all three of those games just all died, and WoW is the only one left standing? You have any idea how much more unlikely that is, the scenario where all of them are declining equally or like close to equally? Yo, what's up? So if you know who Bellular is, you might have seen his clip this week discussing a video by Izen Hart where basically Izen Hart called Bellular a liar, saying that he fabricated a lot of the numbers and that he was wrong. I haven't seen the video, but I did watch all of Bellular's response, so I kind of thought it was in line with my channel, both in the WoW aspect and with the other videos I've made, going through some Earth 2 videos, kind of breaking those down to go through this video and break it down point by point in the way that I've done that. So hopefully if you're from either of those audiences, you'll enjoy this. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the video. And also, if you do kind of enjoy this content, please leave a like down below and consider subscribing to the channel, because I will be making a lot more videos like this, as well as some other content in the future. So yeah, just keep your eyes out. So something you will notice here is that he makes a lot of WoW videos, and I'm almost certain I've seen some of his videos in the past, although apparently not recently. Let me see if I can go all the way down. No, I guess not. You know, I thought I had seen some of his videos. Maybe I just saw him in my feed and never watched. I'm not really sure. I don't know anything about this guy, so I have nothing against him. But I did just hear Bellular's response to this, so I thought I'd go through and just, you know, break it down like I normally do.
Okay, well, you know me. I'm not one for drama. I'm not one to make these type of videos, but what has happened recently has triggered me out of the stratosphere. So something needs to be done.
Now, something I will notice in Bellular's video, he did say that this guy goes kind of hard, and he did mention at the beginning that he was a little triggered. Now, of course, it's one thing to be a little triggered in the moment and then kind of like go off from there. But I feel like it is a separate thing to go off and then edit the video and then release that video on YouTube. Like, that would be a lot different in my opinion. You can disagree with me if you want, but the process of actually going through the video and re-listening to what you're saying and kind of having all that time to think about all of the points you made and possibly what the counterpoints could be to what you're saying, seems like at this point he does actually believe what he's saying here. And so if he does end up kind of going off a little bit in this video, then by virtue of him having edited it and put it out there and not it have just been like a stream or like an immediate recording, I feel like that's enough to kind of show that he does still actually feel like this.
On the matter. What I am talking about is one of the many recent videos about WoW bad consensus farming.
WoW is bad, by the way. Watch my videos for Should You Quit WoW and also the WoW Community's Copium. Those are good ones.
This case by known clickbaiter and general WoW bad fomentator Bellular. So
okay, I'm gonna keep pausing like this often, you know, pause champ, whatever, but Bellular known as a WoW bad commentator. I mean, maybe recently, but that's, I think, very recent because it's such a... the game itself is very bad, and you can fight me on that. I've made a few videos talking about it, so if you disagree, feel free to watch those or to just leave a comment down below. I'm very forward about responding to comments, as you can see from my other videos. But WoW being in the state it is, it's... of course people are going to hate it. It is not in a good state. I mean, a lot of people are leaving the game, and that's what Bellular's video that he's talking about actually goes over, is the number of people who have actually left the game. And I think it's not that hard to believe that Bellular truly thinks that the game is bad, as I do. A lot of people feel that way. It's not that big of a revelation per se. And it's also kind of funny considering, like, not that long ago, like maybe just before Shadowlands or a little bit before that, people would have put Bellular in the same camp as like Tally or Taliesin and Evertail as kind of like WoW apologists. Now, I don't think any of those people are actually WoW apologists. I'm much more favorable to those people's opinions. I think that they actually believe what they say when they say those things about the game, about it being not as bad as people say and stuff like that. I believe they're actually truthful in that. But people would have put Bellular in that camp as kind of a WoW apologist. But now it's interesting to think that Izen apparently thinks that he's oh wow, bad commentator now. I mean, he has like, yeah, he's made a lot of negative videos, but again, I think it's fully warranted. I think the game is horrible right now. I think it's the worst the game has probably ever been. Even Warlords of Draenor, I think it's worse than that. So, you know, that's my opinion. I'm being truthful. Am I a WoW bad commentator? Yeah, probably, but whatever.
I wanted to answer this because generally speaking, I stay away from all this stuff. However, he decided to enter the realm of data, enter the realm of statistics and numbers.
Yeah.
In which case, after I looked at it, first I couldn't do anything because I got a stroke. I just was paralyzed by what my eyes were seeing.
Oh, it's a joke. I thought it was serious.
I decided it was time to correct the record a little bit because there are quite a few, quite literally made up numbers in the video trying to depict the death of WoW. Let me just start saying before I go and start railing on this guy that I do, of course, believe that WoW is doing worse than your average, that there are
it's doing far worse. How could you think it's doing just like he says that like it's barely doing worse than average. I think the game is doing far worse than average, and I mean, we will get into the numbers in this video. He's probably going to dispute the numbers as he already said that they are made up. Now, I also watched Bellular's first video about these numbers, so I don't really know what he's going to say. I don't know what he could possibly say was made up in that. But, you know, maybe he's right and some of these numbers are made up. I'm a little unclear about those things. But to say that WoW isn't in its worst spot as far as, you know, users go, I mean, all you have to do is look at the earnings call from Activision Blizzard pretty recently, like this month, and you can see that the monthly active users are way down across their whole platform, which would stand to reason that they're way down across World of Warcraft as well. So of course that's kind of a leap in logic. I don't have exact proof. Maybe every single person who's ever played WoW is still playing and all the other games are doing horrible. Of course that's possible, but that seems unlikely given the fact of testimonials, the common trend on YouTube, the common trend on Reddit, the common trend on Twitter, what have you. It seems that the game is in a very bad position. Even Asmongold hasn't really been playing the game, and he's, you know, played the game through every content drought imaginable. So those are the reasons I think that the game is in a bad position, along with the numbers that Bellular brings up. If you disagree with any of those points or you think that they're wrong logically, then yeah, go ahead and leave in the comment. Of course, I don't have hard evidence. I don't have like the actual numbers for WoW subs or the actual number for WoW monthly active users. All we have is what's given to us and what we can extrapolate from other data. So nobody actually knows what the true number is, but I think it's not that big of a jump to say that the player base in WoW must be following at least a similar trend as the rest of Blizzard games, if not worse, since it has such a negative view and most of the other games do not. So that's how I feel. Let's see what Izen says here.
The game than average. The only difference between me and this other type of content creator is that I don't farm it for views. That's just about it.
Wait. Really? So maybe he doesn't farm like WoW bad or WoW good for views, but he does seem to farm WoW for views, right? Like all of his videos are about WoW, just like most of Bellular's videos are about WoW, though Bellular has branched out into other games and just gaming news in general. So it seems like maybe this doesn't really hold up. You kind of farm it in the same way he does, where he talks about the news about the game, you talk about the mechanics or maybe the lore or some hidden things. So I feel like it's kind of the same thing, and I feel like you might be, you know, using Bellular for views like I'm about to do for this video. So, you know, I'm okay with it. I think it's a great idea to use Bellular for views, but I don't know if you can levy a claim against him as being bad because of how he monetizes his channel based on WoW news, and then you also monetize your channel based on WoW gameplay. Like those things seem very similar. I guess in this sense he's saying he's not lying, but Bellular is. I guess that's the claim here. Though you'd have to prove Bellular's lying, you would have to not only show that his numbers were wrong, but you'd have to show that they were intentionally wrong. So already he's setting up a very, very high burden of proof for himself. He's going to have to show those two things if he wants to prove by the end of this video that Bellular lied, that he was wrong and he was intentionally wrong. That's going to be very, very hard to prove. I mean, we'll see what he says.
And something so egregious as this video I have just seen happens before my eyes, something needs to be done. I need to raise my hand and point out.
Also, I would like to point out that he is like kind of putting out this like high level of emotion, right? He's saying like, he's like appealing heavily to emotion. He's like, I can't believe this happened before my eyes. It's this huge mega thing that Bellular did. He lied about these numbers. That is in its very nature sensationalist. Maybe he actually believes that and he feels that way. But to say that Bellular is kind of doing this as kind of like a shock value or a way to like tap into the emotions of the community, in the same sense, he's kind of tapping into the emotions of the community that still plays the game or the community that disagrees with Bellular by appealing to those strong emotions as well. So keep that in mind when you're watching this. It's not, if you believe Bellular is doing that, then you also have to believe that Izen is doing it here, because he seems to be playing into it much, much harder, though I think Bellular does play into those emotions quite often.
Few incorrect things that I wouldn't want people to actually believe. Unfortunately, this video will not actually have the reach, to get to all of these people that are getting influenced by such bullshit.
Well, he responded to it on his channel, so he felt that it got enough reach that he wanted to respond. So I feel like you actually did get quite a lot of reach with this, though I don't know how positively, but I don't know how well it was necessarily received. I mean, based on the like to dislike ratio, maybe about 50-50. So, it seems like it got the reach that you were hoping for.
But hey, if the video will just help me and quelch my triggeredness about it, it's gonna be a good effort nonetheless. So let's start with this analysis.
Okay, this is going to be a fun video.
Oh, I bet. Oh, I bet it will.
What the
World
fuck?
of Warcraft is facing a mass exodus. Everyone's leaving. The
True.
cities are empty, the guilds are dying, and the only
Okay, this is kind of hard to watch with it overlaid with this, like with this opacity. I think it would have been better. I don't know if he was trying to avoid like demonetization or like what the reason for doing it like this is. It might have been better if you just put this in like a square at the top like corner here, if you just wanted people to continue watching the gameplay, because as it stands, I can't see the gameplay and I can't see the video I can't see Bellular's video. So it's kind of hard to do both. If you're not going to do what I do and put your cam in the corner and then just have the rest of the video on the main screen and you want the stuff in the background, then maybe just put the video like in the corner up here. Maybe that would be better. Make the video like the stream cam like I have, but the opposite. I feel like that's a lot better for a viewer perspective. Now, of course, this guy's much larger on YouTube, so he's much more experienced than I do. But as a viewer, I'm telling you right now, this is kind of hard to watch.
people left are the boosters and the boosted. It's worse than ever before. Have you heard something like that? Because I think we've all heard some sentiment like that across the internet. Looking at the forums, the social media, I think we can all say that it's gone a little bit wrong.
Yes, because that is what is called an echo chamber. Once you start removing...
Wait. That's not what an echo chamber is, though, right? I mean, just because you've heard something doesn't mean that it's an echo chamber. So you should have defined how it's an echo chamber before just claiming that.
Opinions from the ones you don't agree with, and you only start surrounding yourself with yes
Okay,
men.
but you have to, like, he's making this claim that Bellular only thinks that because of the people that he's surrounded by, but he hasn't proven that. He hasn't shown that in any way. He's just claimed that. You have to prove that if you want people to actually believe you.
Who only have the same opinion and share the same thoughts, that is what you're going to believe.
Okay, I will say that, I mean, maybe the people on his team all just magically agree with him 100%. All the people in his Discord and community all agree with him 100%. I'm sure that a majority of them mostly agree with him, but I don't think all of them do. And that being said, it's kind of hard to be in an echo chamber when you're as public as Bellular, because you're going to get like tweeted at, you're going to get messages, you're going to get emails, you're going to get comments on your videos. And assuming that he reads, at least most of those, he is going to hear these differing opinions. So I don't know if it's fair to say that he's in an echo chamber just based on that.
If repeated enough times.
For Blizzard overall, user numbers are actually their lowest in years. And that's actually in the same quarter as 9.1 and TBC Classic.
It's already been explained. I made a video myself as well. Monthly active users are mostly the fault of other Blizzard titles not do.
Okay, so he says he's made another video. Maybe he proved it in those other videos. but I would possibly like you to touch on it a little bit more here, so maybe he'll do that.
As well. As a matter of fact, the best Blizzard title as of right now is World of Warcraft. It is the game that had to carry the dead corpses of Heroes of the Storm, StarCraft 2, Diablo 3, Hearthstone, and now even Overwatch.
Okay, so maybe it's true that Blizzard, or maybe it's true that World of Warcraft has more monthly users, has more monthly active users than Overwatch, than Hearthstone, than Diablo 3. But you also have to keep in mind that there was no Overwatch during Warlords of Draenor. So you're saying that it's carrying enough to compensate for however many monthly active users there currently are in all of those titles that didn't exist, or I guess in just Overwatch that didn't exist during Warlords of Draenor. And yes, Heroes of the Storm is like basically a dead game, but I have never heard anything about Hearthstone being a dead game. Again, I never watched his video about like those numbers, so maybe he proves it in there or says so in there. I'm going to find it hard to imagine that the monthly active users from those games made up that big of a gap in like between 2016 and now. You think those games were responsible for that entire peak? Maybe. That's a very big claim, and like I said, maybe he proves it in his other video, but he did not here. So I'm going to go ahead and say I don't believe that on its face, but I haven't been shown proof. So
the reason why, as it will be pointed out, Blizzard used to be at its peak at 46 million active users instead of what they have now, which is 26, is because the other games were all doing well. It did have little to do with World of Warcraft. It's because Overwatch had recently launched. You just had pretty much the last, so to speak, patch of Diablo 3 with the Necromancer, and you had Hearthstone still being pretty popular. So that was
I think Hearthstone is still very popular as far as like online card games go, at least. So I do agree that maybe Diablo 3 is a much lower player base than it did before, but Overwatch was not out until after that 2016 number. So I mean, it's possible that Overwatch solely made up that huge gap, like I said before, but it's so hard to believe that people. So what you're saying is people didn't come to. Okay, basically, for this to be true, and Overwatch to have made up that entire gap, Overwatch, Hearthstone, and Diablo 3, is you're telling me that there were no new players after 2016 for World of Warcraft. Because if there were, then you have to agree that there are still a lot of people playing Overwatch and a lot of people playing Hearthstone, so they can't make up that entire gap. So the drop off must have been at least partially World of Warcraft's player base leaving, at least partially. And those numbers that Bellular gave didn't include this most recent exodus due to the lawsuit and stuff. Those numbers were strictly like from 9.0 to 9.1. So that's also a kind of a big important claim as well, to keep in mind that a lot of people did leave over these lawsuit allegations. So the game is probably doing even worse. And also you also have to consider that World of Warcraft Shadowlands had the most sold games on launch for a PC game ever. So that already means that number should have been really high, right? But World of Warcraft should have been able to carry those games to the same level that it did in the previous years, like you're claiming, but it wasn't able to, right? It's gone to such a level that it's bad. So, I mean, again, maybe it's possible that Overwatch, Hearthstone, and Heroes of the Storm all made up that extra, 20 some odd million. But does that seem likely that their player base between those four games has dropped by like all of it? Or does it seem more likely that all of Blizzard's games have seen a significant decrease in players, so much so that with more IPs they are seeing an equal number of monthly active users as they did in 2016? Of course, all of it's speculation. Nobody has the actual numbers except for Blizzard. So nobody is going to know 100% sure, but now it's just going to be what's more likely. And I'll let you guys as viewers decide If you agree with me, thank you. Leave it as a comment. If you disagree with me, tell me why. I'll respond. We can have a discussion in the comments. I've done it before. So yes, I don't think that you can actually make that statement without seeming fairly absurd to say that those games made up that much of a difference for the monthly active users for Blizzard. That would be incredible, in my opinion. That would be unsubstantiated also, because at least for Bellular, he shows numbers to kind of back up what he's saying with the, exodus from 9.1 to 9.0.
Reason why, and that's the reason why now the MAUs are declining. It has much less to do with WoW and way more
I just
to do
disagree.
with the rest of the titles that Blizzard is inexplicably letting die, particularly some more popular ones like Diablo. Although, as we know, there is going to be, soon enough, I guess, Diablo 4.
Blizzard are tight-lipped about individual numbers for their games because that lets them control the narrative. Thanks to WoWranks.io, though, we know roughly how many characters there are in World of Warcraft.
No, we don't. You know why we don't? Because number one, in many of the disclaimers that he's been doing in this video, he forgets to remember everyone that WoWranks.io does not have access to the API related to the Chinese servers. Every single thing said in this video, short of the number of kills that have happened for guilds entirely and for the manual entries, particularly for high mythic plus keys, is going to lack Chinese players.
Okay, that's true, but does it actually make that big of a difference if we can't include Chinese player base at all? Like, we have no knowledge of their numbers at all, but we do know like the EU and NA numbers, and we also know that the higher level players are going to be the ones that stick around the game the longest, right? If you're more invested in the game, you're more likely to continue playing it. So if we're seeing a decrease in players from the upper levels, then it stands to reason that we would be seeing a decrease in players from lower levels, unless you think that people at the top are more likely to leave the game. I don't think that's true, because the people at the top are generally going to be the ones kind of monetizing off of it as well. So but you're in the space where you have to ask yourself, do the people in the upper level of players, I'm talking like, heroic to mythic rating, high key mythic plus running, high PvP rating, are those people more likely to leave the game than the people that are less invested in that kind of aspect of the game? Those people at a lower kind of tier of play are playing it more in a casual sense, and there are many other casual games. But if you're a hardcore raider, or you're a hardcore mythic plus runner, or a hardcore PvPer, there's not many other options for you, because what MMO has better PvP than WoW? Maybe you can say some of the other games coming out soon might, like maybe New World might have better PvP, but there's not like an arena, there's no rating in New World, so that's a completely different niche than what would be PvPers in World of Warcraft. If we look at raiders, there's no doubt in my mind that World of Warcraft has the best raids in pretty much any MMO. I've seen some of the Final Fantasy XIV raids, they look really awesome. But from the prevailing opinions I've heard, and from what I can tell by looking at the Final Fantasy XIV raids and having done a lot of the World of Warcraft raids myself, I'm willing to say that the World of Warcraft raids are much better, and there's a lot more money in them, right? So that's another thing that you have to consider. And then Mythic Plus as well. There's also money in that. They have their own tournaments for it. And I forgot to mention that there's money in the PvP as well. So are the people that are likely at the top making money, or possibly who like that kind of niche gameplay that's not really offered by other games, are they more likely to leave? Or are the casual players who are playing it in a sense that could be filled by many other games, are they more likely to leave? And in my opinion, it's the people that are casuals that are more likely to leave the game. So if we're looking at the drop off in heroic runners, the drop off in mythic runners, the drop off in any kind of raider at all, or the drop off in mythic plus runners, or the drop off in PvP, I think all of those are really strong indicators that the game has lost a lot of players, because that's generally, and that's more of a niche down area of the game. And if those niche down areas are losing players, then the broader areas are going to lose players as well, because those players can find their, the those players can find their sense of joy from other games more easily.
That's the number one thing that is not being said in this video. When you go over and you try to look up in the same site that he has been using and referencing as a source, Korea is being able to be tracked, Taiwan is being able to be tracked, not China. So any of these numbers, any of these drops whatsoever, even counting the previous expansions, still do not include China.
Yeah, but I mean, again, like, it might be true that China is like carrying the entire WoW game, but why would you consider that? Why would you think that China is carrying the game if you have no proof? Like, we can't say one way or the other, so we have to use the data we have to even make kind of speculation like this. So if you're going to claim that these other games like Overwatch, Hearthstone, whatever, are the reason that Blizzard has lost a lot of its monthly active users, then you would also have to look at those Chinese numbers, but you also don't have those numbers. So you're kind of admitting a fault in your own logic as well, right? So like, either way, you're both of you are making a speculation based off of the numbers you have available. So it's pretty much irrelevant what happens in China unless we can get some kind of numbers out of there, which we can't. So this is where we're at.
API exists and all this data can be scraped.
Yes, but not the data for Chinese players.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
28 days before August 2nd, there were just over 3 million characters who logged into World of Warcraft at least once and belonged to a covenant. On February 2nd, that same statistic was 6.1 million. That is less than half the active characters after 6 months. Not good.
So, I mean, basically what he's saying is, if you're playing at the end game, you are going to have picked a covenant. You have to, if you want to do like raiding, or if you want to do Mythic Plus or PvP, you have to pick a covenant. It's such a huge power increase, and basically the story forces you to, whether you do Threads of Fate or level through to the level 60. Either way, you have to pick a covenant. So if half the characters at the end game haven't logged in, then that would probably suggest that somewhere around half, maybe more, maybe less of the player base has left. Because you have to imagine, the people more likely to stay are, again, people who have more commitment in the game, which means people with alts. And if you sign in with an alt, that counts towards that number. So it's more likely that people with many alts have stayed in the game, while people with less alts have left the game because they're less committed to the game. That's my opinion, but I also think it's pretty like obvious that if you like the game more, you're going to play more of it, and you're going to want to play other classes and possibly other specs, and so level up other characters to try those things out. I don't think that's too big of a stretch.
This is, for the record, the only source he is going to use for the entire video as to why the player base has dropped by 50%. This seems to be,
I mean, it's a pretty good argument, I think.
50, it's a pretty round number. It's half, so it's a nice number to use as a clickbait. The reason why this is pointless is because, number one, this is a third-party site, unaffiliated with Blizzard. There is absolutely no confirmation that any of this is true. But more importantly, what matters is that you can use other numbers to fit your narrative. Just like he's doing here, I could do the exact opposite. For example, there is one thing we know. You know what it is? It's the fact that Blizzard, doing their quarterly reports, their financial reports to their investors, said the engagement trends since the Shadowlands release are stronger than levels typically seen at this point in the expansion.
World of Warcraft player and engagement trends since Shadowlands release are stronger than levels typically seen at this point after an expansion launch. But you also have Classic, right? There was no Classic until BFA, which had a pretty high peak, which, if I'm not mistaken, Classic was a huge influx of players. And that's another thing I actually didn't bring up, is this drop-off in players also includes WoW Classic, right? So you have to consider it. So that's WoW Classic, Overwatch, Hearthstone, World of Warcraft, all as opposed to Heroes of the Storm, World of Warcraft, and Hearthstone before. So you've pretty much doubled your number of playable games, and still you're at the same level you were then. I feel like, and also this was in their earnings report. I did talk about the earnings report a little bit in other videos. Like, the reason that they word it like this is because they have nothing else really to say, right? If they had more that they wanted to talk about, if they had more valuable insights into their player base, then they would have said more. But this basically just means that, yeah, there's more people engaging with the game right now than there normally would be at this point in the expansion launch. So this is the first time in an expansion launch that we've also had another expansion launch in the same time frame, because between BFA and Classic, originally it was like, oh, a year plus, right? Oh, but this is a little bit different because TBC Classic released during this quarter that they're talking about here. So of course they're going to see an increase in players there, whereas before, at this point, in no other expansion had there been like a second kind of launch of a similar game, right? So that's kind of weird that they would bring that up here.
Longer than levels typically seen at this point in the expansion. Then in the investor call from February, there was also another interesting thing, which was in the months leading up to the expansion and in the time since the launch, the game reached and has sustained its highest number of players on monthly or longer subscription terms compared to the same period ahead and of following the release of the expansion. So
okay, so I did hear Bellular talk about this, but it is something I also brought up in one of my previous videos, is WoW removed the option to purchase only 1 month at a time, and they forced all subscriptions onto a renewal. So yes, and they've also increased the number of like 6-month subscription bonuses for mounts that they have. So this number here that he's talking about, yeah, there might be higher people on monthly or longer term subscriptions, but that's because they only have monthly or longer term subscriptions now. They don't have anything else. They don't have the 1 month thing that you could buy before. So this point, like, he missed that, I guess. But also, I'm willing to bet that in the next earning call, we will see a pretty drastic decrease in the number of players. And I hope when that happens that Izen will kind of release a video admitting his faults here. But to read into this and think that this is not because of their change to how subscriptions work, I think is pretty ignorant. So if you're a viewer and you're watching this and you're reading this and you're like, yeah, they have the highest number of subscriptions that they've ever had. Yeah, because they can only do that now. They can't buy the game time now. Okay, I mean, you can buy the WoW token, but you can't just one-off purchase the game time that you used to be able to.
then we go even further back, and we know that this same period, centered around Worlds of Draenor, passed the 10 million active subscribers. In fact, the voices were a little bit over 12 million. But at least the certain one that we got from the quarterly report from Blizzard themselves was over 10 million. So we did have the report in February from Blizzard in February of this year that Shadowlands did reach the highest ever point of subscribers of any other.
Yeah, again,
WoW
there's
title.
no other option.
Of course, a bunch of this is attributed to Classic as well as TBC Classic, right? That's obvious. The point that makes this entire argument related to going to a third-party site to check the active players is, number one, again, it does not count China.
Doesn't matter.
Be repeated because last I've been
Oh, but
told
it doesn't matter. It doesn't
by
need to be
some
repeated. It
experts,
should never
China
been brought
is
up.
pretty big. So
Yeah, it's big,
something to
but
take into
it
account.
doesn't matter for the argument, right? Because the argument is that they've seen a drop in players, and they have. So I guess you could say that it's less accurate because it's possible that the drop in China was less severe than the drop in the West, the rest of Asia and Europe, but we don't know that. We can't even speculate on that because we don't have any of those numbers. So we can only do what we have with the numbers, and this is what we have.
And at the very least, he will mention this. It does only count max level players or players who have already hit max level.
No, not only max level players. It could be people who did Threads of Fate as well.
And they can use the Threads of Fate, so they can immediately choose a Covenant. But even then, what these numbers would say is that Shadowlands on release beat Worlds of Draenor, got past 10 million, past 11, maybe 12 million active subscribers, even if you take away a few of them from only playing Classic.
A few of them. I feel like a lot of people play Classic, but yes, Shadowlands on release was incredibly huge. It was extremely popular. It was like, yeah, like I said, it was the most sold PC game ever, or the fastest selling PC game ever, right? So yeah, it was pretty big. But Bellular's claim isn't that it was never big. His claim is that it shrunk. That's his claim.
WoW, not even bothering to try out the expansion. And out of all of that, basically barely 50% of them even.
Also, you have to consider now that people logging into Classic and people logging into Retail count as 2 monthly active users for World of Warcraft. So that's even worse when you kind of consider those monthly active user numbers.
Got to choose a covenant. That is why this number is not very reliable, at the very least if you go and look at other data. But even then, let's just keep entertaining this notion, this theory.
We have no way of knowing, of these characters, how many are alts. But if we assume the average is anywhere between 1.5 and 3 alts per player, then it does paint a dark picture.
Yes, a very dark picture, so dark that it actually cancelled the entirety of Asia, minus Korea and Taiwan, because once again...
Well, we're only going to be able to work with the data we have, dude. Of course. I mean, yeah, I'll iterate it again. It's possible that China's player base hasn't changed at all. They're still incredibly massive, but I find that unlikely. And also, you can only work with the numbers you're given. So I'm going to probably have to keep saying that since he keeps bringing up China. We don't have Chinese numbers. We can't even begin to guess about Chinese numbers. So maybe it would have been more accurate for Bellular to say North America, Europe, and all of Asia except China. All of that would still paint a pretty bad picture of the game, to be honest. If all of those regions have lost half their player base combined, that's pretty bad.
We have forgotten to mention that China here doesn't count. Even assuming that these numbers are properly recorded from WoW ranks taken from the API of Blizzard, it is still...
Yeah, so if you think WoW ranks is wrong, or you're saying that it's like unaccounted for, then you're also kind of assuming that the Blizzard API is wrong. Which, I mean, it could be. But why would Blizzard let their API be wrong? I'm not really sure. So,
in a major region.
I don't know.
To get a better picture, right? Let's go and have more data. Let's go through it.
Oh, data, he says. Nice. What's it about?
Let's talk about in-game activity in World of Warcraft. And we'll start by looking at the foundational pillar of World of Warcraft's endgame, raiding.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
In the first month of Castle Nathria, 37,447 guilds killed Shriekwing and Normal. In the first month of Sanctum of Domination, only 18,594 killed Targru. So basically, half of WoW's guilds did not come back.
Again, this is cherry picking. This is fitting your own narrative with something useless as normal raids. Of course, this comes...
Wait. How is that cherry picking, dude? Some guilds can skip normal because they ran mythic during Nathria, which is what my guild did. But I'm also willing to say that that's probably still irrelevant, since how important sockets of domination were this tier, and how running on normal gave you a higher chance of getting your item with the socket in it, which was, you know, a normal item with a socket in it was better than a mythic item from Nathria. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably more people ran normal in this second tier than would have normally ran normal, because you can normally just skip it. They didn't this time because they needed the socket items. Now, of course, that's, again, speculation on my end. I'm just giving you the reasons I think that this is probably false, which, again, he's speculating, saying that normal doesn't matter, which I don't know how you could say normal doesn't matter. I'm, again, going to go out on a limb here and say that more people run normal than any other version of raid, and maybe people run LFR more, though I feel like LFR is kind of seen as a joke throughout most of the community, but maybe some more casual people do run a lot of LFR, and it is very accessible to run LFR. You don't have to get a group together at all. You can queue for it. So normal is probably the most run version of the raid, aside from maybe LFR, but I'm not really sure on that. So to say that normal doesn't matter is, I think, laughable. Normal probably matters the most out of any out of any difficulty of the raid. But I will say it would be better if you could check for each difficulty like simultaneously. But like to say that normal doesn't matter is just a stupid point.
From someone who, well over a month into 9.1, is 8 out of 10 heroic progression. He basically does not raid, yet he tries to make this point, which is, of course...
Wait, how does you... Okay, whether or not you raid seriously or not, if you're 10 out of 10 mythic, means fuck all about your ability to read numbers. So that doesn't mean anything. Maybe if he was saying like, oh, this boss is hard or this boss isn't hard, like maybe you could say like, wow, you don't even raid that hard, you don't know. But again, even then, if you've experienced the boss, you can say from your own experience whether it's hard or not. But you could also probably look at numbers and say the number of people who've killed that boss based on the number of people who killed the previous boss to see if it was harder or not. But I mean, that's aside the point. You don't have to. You could have never played World of Warcraft in your life and you could still make a valid argument for how this matters. It's just looking at numbers. So whether or not you run, you know, LFR, normal, mythic, heroic, whatever, doesn't matter because that's irrelevant for the point.
Made up, because you only decide to look at basically the only difficulty that is going to prove your point, which is...
Do the other difficulties
rating.
dispute it?
Who the fuck gives a shit about normal rating?
Well, most people do normal rating. That's where most people raid.
Even considers it as a point to see how many guilds are actually...
Why? I want to know why he thinks normal doesn't matter. I agree. Maybe it would have been Bellular if it did all versions of the raid, but why? Most people do normal.
In the game.
And as I said before, as you go up in skill, those people are going to be less likely to leave the game. So maybe it's true that heroic saw a less steep drop off and mythic saw a less steep drop off, but I'm still willing to bet that there was a drop off. And if the drop off for normal is the majority of the people who are raiding in the first place, then that's kind of a big deal. Like you can't just say normal doesn't matter just because it's easier than what you can do. You know, like that's not a good argument, because now you're not making a claim against the point. Now you're kind of saying like, well, Bellular can't say anything because he hasn't cleared heroic. That's kind of weird, man. It's not a good point.
Because I can give you some numbers. For example,
okay,
since he's mentioning the difference, look at that drop, that massive drop between 9.0 and 9.1. The guilds who killed the Nathrius in Mythic after a month were 64, whereas the guilds who killed Sylvanas after a month, in fact barely a month, of Sylvanas were 149.
Okay. That's a good counter argument, okay? But here's the thing. One, a month is a month. It doesn't matter if it's barely a month. The first month of Nathria and the first month of Sanctum of Domination are going to be equally the same amount of time, right? So it doesn't matter if it's barely been a month. It's not like it's going to increase after it's already been a month. So that emphasis you put there is kind of irrelevant. But also consider this. If the raid is substantially easier than Nathria, which I think it is, and I think we can see that the mythic version is substantially easier. Just look at the Race to World first. It didn't even last a complete reset. He's killed in the first week. It could be that all of the guilds who are going to finish the raid are doing it sooner, so this number goes up. Whereas with the normal, it's people are going to be doing normal a lot more than people are going to be doing mythic. Again, mythic you can only do once a week. Normal you could technically do as many times as you want, though you are locked out on loot. You can still run it multiple times, so that's also something to think about. But this does bring up kind of a valid counterpoint, and I would like to see how long it takes the rest of the Alliance to finish out their Hall of Fame. It could be, you know, much sooner than it took them to fill out the Hall of Fame for Nathria, but I think it might take about equally as long or longer because there's just seemingly, in my opinion and in Bellular's opinion, less people playing the game. But that would probably matter. But I would also like to see the actual numbers of people killing these bosses later on down the road. But I also think that's going to be very hard to find because the way that these APIs work, you pretty much only get the number of kills and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to see how many players have cleared this. But yeah, this could be a valid point. But it also could be that the raid is just that much easier. So people are filling out their Hall of Fame much, much faster. It's hard to say with this one. That's probably also one of the reasons Bellular didn't really bring up Mythic. It's probably because just less people tend to do Mythic. That could probably be the reason, but I'm not sure.
Might not help me, but this means twice as many. Just throwing it out there.
No, it could mean twice as many. It could mean literally, yeah, twice as many people are going to be doing the mythic raid, but it also could mean that it's just an easier raid, and so people have finished their Hall of Fame faster, right? Like, that could be, that's also what it could mean. Where for Bellular, what's the counter argument to less people doing it? You could say that the raid is harder, but obviously it's not harder since, we can look at the Race to World first, which I brought up earlier, but we could also look at the number of guilds that have actually finished it. And we could also say that, and are you going to argue that there aren't less people doing this? And you could also say that the gear difference between what was happening in Nathria and here is a lot different too, because you started off much closer to a mythic item level than you did here, where here, you started off with mythic level gear from Nathria, which is heroic level for this raid, but you started with nothing here. You started at fresh out of the expansion for this one, so that's also kind of something you need to think about here. Of course, this will become more and more clear throughout the patch, and as we can track those numbers a lot more, it'll become more obvious whether or not it's the difficulty is harder or easier, and if it's the number of players who have dropped off for normal, or if normal is just much harder than Nathria normal. But I don't know if I would say that I didn't do normal for Sanctum of Domination. I did do normal for Nathria, and it was very, very easy. I only did heroic for Sanctum of Domination. I think the first boss is always a give me, so I think that's a pretty good way to look at it. If we probably looked at mythic first kills, I think he said this, yeah. If we looked at mythic first kills, I think that would be a better argument too, just because of how much of a give me the first boss is normally. But I could be wrong.
But you know what? He's only counting normal. So what about we look at the more average raiding guild? Like, instead of looking at something as useless and pointless for
it's
your
not normal.
like the first boss.
It's not useless. I'm pretty sure normal is the most rated difficulty of the tier. So I don't know. Calling it useless, again, it seems not like a good idea.
Let's look at the first big stop, the first big block of a raid, something like Council of Blood in Nathria or Painsmith Rasnal in Sanctum of Domination.
But why? I don't understand why you would look somewhere like midway in the raid as opposed to the first boss in the raid, because the first boss is always going to have more people killing it. It's going to have the most people who are going to kill it throughout the expansion. But so you could say like maybe the wall is going to be harder for Painsmith than it is for Council of Blood, or vice versa, whatever. It doesn't really matter because the layouts are different and the difficulties are going to be much different. So I think, again, what you really want to look at is the people who've killed the first boss, because that's going to be the most number of people who are going to try that in the expansion. And it could just be
After
that
a month of Nathria,
one raid was way easier than the other.
Got to 289 kills, whereas after a month of Painsmith Rasnal in Mythic progression, 437 guilds killed it. So this number is essentially taken specifically just to be able to show you this drop, even though when you look at Mythic progression, it's in fact the opposite.
Yeah, but Mythic is such a niche version of the game. I think that's like, I think you should look at Mythic, but I think that is the worst one you can look at in terms of all of the difficulties if you're trying to look at a trend for the overall player base. Now, yeah, let's go and look up the first boss though. Okay, so I pulled up the number of guilds who killed Mythic Shriekwing in 1 month and the number of guilds who killed Mythic Terragru in 1 month. And yes, it looks like the number of guilds who killed Mythic Terragru is, about 100 more than the number of guilds who killed Mythic Shriekwing. So it does appear that either there are more guilds Mythic rating, which is possible, the number of guilds Mythic rating haven't fallen off, again, possible, or that the raid is much easier. So those are the things that we're going to have to think about here. So it is true that for Mythic, the fall off isn't as drastic, at least as far as it goes in the number of kills on the first boss. I also know that Bellular brings up a number of how many people killed the first boss to how many people killed the last boss. I don't remember if that's for Mythic. If it is, then I think that's actually is a substantial statistic. If it is for normal, then again, I think it would be nice to have every single difficulty represented, but I do understand only using normal because it is the option most people choose to do. Now, I do want to point out the number of pulls it typically took to kill each of these bosses. And of course, that could be due to gear and whatnot. I think it's irrelevant why it is. I think the importance is to show perhaps an alternative reason to why more guilds have killed certain bosses in Mythic, because it could be that the bosses are just simpler, whether that's gear or the mechanics, doesn't matter. So these numbers aren't like the best, because you know you might have guilds coming in later here that find it easier or harder to pull based on their gear or their skill, but it should be pretty close overall. These curves generally should level out over a month or so, and they're going to be pretty close. So I think it's a very good estimation. So it looks like Shriekwing may be a little bit harder than Terragru, but about the same. So the beginning is looking pretty equal. Eye of the Jailer, substantially harder than Huntsman. So maybe the second boss was a little bit harder. But then we get the 9 is way easier than Hungering, and we can actually look at these two together. Remnant was about equal to these two, although it looks like it may be a little bit harder. So the 9 and Remnant, like averaged out, is going to be easier than these two averaged out. So it looks like maybe we're about equal again, where the Eye was a little bit harder than Huntsman, but the next bosses were a little bit easier in Nathria. And then we can go look at Artificer and Lady Enerva and Painsmith and Soulrender. So Soulrender was very easy, it looks like, but then Painsmith was incredibly hard. This was a very strong mid wall for Mythic, and that's because the spikes that you cannot walk through are a pain in the ass. So, and we look here, you know, Lady Enerva and Zymox, both a little bit harder than Soulrender, but nowhere near as hard as Painsmith. So it looks like the mid wall was substantially harder for Sanctum of Domination. However, when we start getting into the bosses past the mid wall, you're going to see something very interesting. So I'm going to compare Council of Blood to Fate Scribe and Sludge Fist to Guardian of the first one, because really Guardian of the first one was supposed to be the Sludge Fist fight for this tier. And if you look, 9 to 18 pulls compared to 87 to 151. This boss was an absolute joke. And if we look at Council to Fate Scribe, again, this boss was an absolute joke in comparison to the other past mid-tier bosses. So it's looking like this difference in difficulty here is a lot, and it's across two bosses after the mid wall. So I feel like this is going to be a very strong argument for this being an easier raid, though you can come down and look at Painsmith and be like, wow, that is so much harder than the other mid walls here. So it's true, it is a lot harder, but if you average this out, it's true it is a lot harder, but let's do a little bit of bad math here and just average this out just for a quick kind of idea of how this is going to go. And we're going to give the upper end of all sides just to be as fair as we can. So we say 127 plus 55 divided by 2 is going to give us 91. So it's about 91 pulls average for this mid tier here. And then if we look at this mid tier here, we get 67 plus 57 divided by 2. So we get 62. So we have about 30 extra pulls on this mid wall. But if we go up to the ones just past this mid wall here, we get 18 plus 52 divided by 2 to get 35. And then we get 151 plus 116 divided by 2 to get 133. So that's more than double the extra pulls it took for that mid wall. But okay, let's keep looking. So Stone Legion to Kel'Thuzad. Stone Legion 151 to 239. Kel'Thuzad 26 to 45. That is huge. 100 plus more pulls on average. 120 plus more pulls on the lower end, and on the upper end we're looking at almost 200 more pulls. So that's huge. And of course, Stone Legion was bugged at the beginning, but that doesn't really account for such a long period of time. This was just a harder fight. And then we look at the last boss, 85 to 130 and 170 to 310. So clearly Sylvanas was a much easier boss. And assuming you agree with my quick math for the average extra pulls between the two tiers on the mid and just above mid tier pulls, that this Nathria is a significantly harder raid than this one right here for Mythic. Now, this doesn't speak anything to normal or heroic, so of course it could be that normal this tier was harder or easier than normal this tier, and same with heroic. But as far as Mythic goes, this is looking like a much easier raid. So just want to put that out there, that if we look at these things together, that's the case. And I don't know if Izen is going to look at the post mid-tier bosses. Well, he probably won't, because of how absolutely ridiculous the difference between Sludgefist and Guardians is, and Council and Fate Scribe is. But if we just think about the absolute drastic difference between these two, so that could be why more people are clearing this, is because it's way easier. Okay, just wanted to say that these are the mythic numbers that he's looking at.
More guilds progressing now than there were in Nathria. At the very least, progressing faster through bosses and getting to the last boss earlier.
Yes,
Very
which
rough estimate of
which I just showed is probably because the raid tier is much easier.
raid size. This means anywhere between 560 and 750,000 characters killed Shriekwing in that time period, but only between 280k and 370k for Taragru.
Again, this is exclusively cherry-picking normal kills, because since he's talking about the first boss...
Well, okay, so he's not really cherry-picking normal kills. He said it was normal kills. You might say that it's a bad comparison because it's only normal, but again, normal is the most rated difficulty of the tier, so I mean, keep that in mind. And it's not really cherry picking. He already said it was all normal kills.
And mythic raiding also has a pretty easy boss, and it's a very easy way for people who don't raid to still get a juicy mythic level quality item. For example, in the first month of Shriekwing, you have gotten 5,092 kills of mythic
so he did bring this
whereas
up.
in the first month of Taragru, you have gotten 4,000.
I saw a higher number.
So it's almost literally the same amount of kills. Yet this supposed 50% drop keeps being pushed. So this entire fancy graphics...
Wait, did I? Is it possible that I looked at the wrong times? Okay, I mean, interesting. He got different numbers than I did, but maybe I looked at it wrong. It's possible because I kind of just looked it up real quick.
You have gotten 5,092 kills of Mythic Shriekwing, whereas in the first month of Taragru, you have gotten 4,965. So it's almost...
Yeah, so I did look this up. Apparently, I guess I got the numbers wrong, or I'm not really sure what... maybe I just got the dates wrong here. It doesn't really matter. The point is, either way, Taragru has an average of less pulls, which means it's an easier boss, right? So more people should be able to kill it. So it seems like it's... So you can't really use this. This doesn't indicate that the boss is harder. This indicates that less people killed it. What indicates that the boss is harder is the number of pulls.
Literally the same amount of kills. Yet this supposed 50% drop keeps being pushed. So this entire...
Yeah, well, again, less people are going to raid. Less people who raid Mythic are going to leave the game, of course. But, I mean, good point.
Graphics with at the bottom saying that this is the data from Raider.io. Yeah, maybe. From normal. With theorized amount of players
normal matters.
And that
normal matters.
Because Heroic and Mythic are painting a completely different story, which he won't mention a single time here.
That looks a lot smaller than our active character count, doesn't it? It's food for thought.
No, it's not. It's food for shills. It's food for people with an agenda who want to make a point, feeding on the negativity around...
That was very aggressive. I think it's completely reasonable to look at normal. I wouldn't call him a shill if I disagreed with him. I would say maybe you should look at Heroic and Mythic and LFR if you can. But to call him a shill, like now you're again, so now he's saying he's doing this intentionally, but he's not doing it intentionally. He was upfront that it was all normal kills. He didn't say it wasn't normal. So you're being very aggressive for no reason, Izen, and you haven't proved that he did it intentionally. So hard for you to say he's a shill or a liar.
The game, so they make a completely made up video with a bunch of made up stats.
Well, the stats aren't made up. They're just normal stats. It's not like he made up those numbers. What?
Just so people can flood in and type wow bad, upvotes to the left, feel better about themselves, and go again.
I mean, wow is bad though, but I don't think that's what happened to you. I methem those stats are pretty self-explanatory. If you think that he should have included Mythic and Heroic, fine. But he should have included them as an aggregate, which still would have looked really bad for Heroic and Mythic. But I'm gonna guess that the reason he didn't include them as an aggregate is because you don't have the actual number of players for Heroic and normal as you do with Mythic. You know, it's exactly 20. I think it would have been better if he had aggregated all of the kills and just compared it that way, because I'm pretty sure it would have still been the same, and then this guy wouldn't be complaining about it. So maybe Bellular should make an amendment video where he just aggregates the normal, heroic, and mythic kills together.
Graceful.
The exact same methodology returns a less substantial drop in players, only 30%. Over 34,000 people killed Talok.
Yeah, and also if you're looking at the normal from 9.0 and the normal from 9.1, how does that not indicate a drop off in players to you? I'm actually kind of curious. If you're watching this and you disagree with Bellular, I want you to tell me why that doesn't indicate a drop off in players, because it seems that more people would be doing normal and it's easier, so more people could clear it, but there's less people doing so.
In Uldir in the first month, and that dropped to 24,000 killing Champion of Light in Desara lore. Still huge, but it does pale in comparison to a whole 50% drop.
Again, exclusively for normal boss kills. This is not what is happening in heroic, and not
I know.
what is happening
He
in
never
mythic,
said it
which
wasn't
is what the
normal.
raiding progression is. Normal and LFR don't exist. They are not.
What do you mean they don't exist? They have the most people in them. It's such a stupid statement. That statement is so stupid.
Raiding, they're not indicative of any type of curve when it comes to.
Yes, they are. They have more people.
If there is less guilds in normal, if there is more.
That's why the achievement for clearing heroic is called ahead of the curve. You're above average. And then killing mythic is cutting edge. You're way above average. You're above average.
Or at least even in heroic.
The point is clear. Shadowlands is performing very poorly for player retention in between the patches.
Yes, except you forget to point out that it is only for normal raiding, not heroic.
No, he did point that out. He did say that. He said it was only normal.
And you also forgot to mention that the player base counted does not include Chinese players. Outside
Yeah, but
of this,
okay, true. He didn't mention that, but again, we don't have data for it, so it's irrelevant.
Statement of the situation.
We've looked at how many people come back to raid for a new patch, but how many actually survive to the end of the raid? Uldir was actually similarly bad. Only 56% of 34,000 kills made it to Gahun. Most of the other raids that we've got data for are in the high 70s. So either the 0.0 raids are harder, or the less dedicated sort of new expansion players generally don't come back for the later patches and stick with it for ages.
No, that's a shill point. People who actually
That's not a shill point.
raid, people who actually know about the raid would have told you even months ago that Nathria might have been the hardest heroic raid released by Blizzard. I had multiple videos about it, saying how much harder was the progression going. It had nothing to do with less players getting to the end because what, they quit mid-tier? No, compared
No, I don't think that's his point. I think his point is that I think he's going to compare the number of people. It's been a while since I've seen the video, but doesn't he just compare the number of people who cleared the first and last boss in 9.0 and the first and last boss in 9.1? Isn't that what he compares?
First raids.
It's not a shill point. Do I actually want to go back and hear his point?
Correct statement
Let's
of
listen
the
again.
situation.
We've looked at how many people come back to raid for a new patch, but how many actually survive to the end of the raid? Uldir was actually similarly bad. Only 56% of 34,000 kills made it to Gahun. Most of the other raids that we've got data for are in the high 70s. So either the 0.0 raids are harder, or the less dedicated sort of new expansion players generally don't come back for the later patches and stick with it for ages.
Oh, well, no, he gave 2 points. He gave 2 points. He gave 2 points. He said either it's harder or they don't come back.
Chill point. People who actually raid, people who actually know about the raid.
I actually raided. I agree. It was a hard raid. But okay, I actually raided Nathria. I agree it was a pretty hard raid, but he already said that it's possible that it was just harder.
Even months ago that Nathria might have been the hardest heroic raid released by Blizzard. I had multiple videos about it, saying how much harder was the progression going. It had nothing to do with less players getting to the end. Because
Well, I don't know if it had nothing to do with that. That seems like a stretch. It had nothing to do with it. Of course, it had nothing. Yeah, that's a pretty big statement. But I agree, it was a hard tier, and Bellular even gave that as one of the options.
They quit mid-tier. No, compared to first raids like Uldir, to first raids like Emerald, Nightmare, or even High Mole, those were laughable. Absolutely laughable in comparison to
sure.
Nathria. Council of Blood was a harder boss than whatever you had in the previous 3 expansions worth of first raid tiers.
Mm-hmm.
Shadowlands' credit. More guilds killed Denathrius and Heroic than any other end boss in modern WoW. So I guess it's a big shame about Sanctum then.
Why? Why is it a big shame? It's just been barely a month since the raid has come out. How can you
No, but they're comparing a month of both raids. I don't know. Do you not read or listen? It's a month of both raids, brother.
Because when you look at the kills, since he's talking about curve, since he's talking about ahead of the curve, Heroic clearing.
No, he's talking about in the first month is what he's talking about.
Boss, Sylvanas kills in Heroic are nowhere near this supposed 50% drop compared to Castonatria. They are in fact much closer. Yet it is being presented as some sort of deserted raid. Even if you go into the mid-tier, okay, not even looking at the last kill, at the last
No,
boss,
but you should look at the last kill, dude. You need to look at the last kill because it shows how many people went all the way through the raid. That's the comparison here.
Of Blood after a month of Heroic having 9,300 kills, and Pains Me Trasnal after 1 month of Heroic having 8,000 kills. That's not even a 15% drop.
Point 2 then.
Yeah, but you only went midway.
Drop off in raiding from Nathria to Sanctum of Domination is around 50%, and that is significantly worse.
Hey, I don't know if he's gonna show it, but there was a point where he had like Bellular had a graph of both of them. I guess he's not gonna show it because it was too good of a point. But yeah, if you go watch Bellular's video, he has a graph showing the people in the first month who cleared he has the people in the first month who cleared Shriekwing, and then next to that the people in the first month who cleared Sire, and then on the next one he has the people in the first month who killed Tergru, and then the people in the first month who killed Sylvanas. And the drop off is substantial for a raid that I've shown, I think to a reasonable degree, that was easier than Nathria.
30% drop off in early BFA.
This is fake news. This drop off is only counting normal raiding.
Yeah, but more people do normal, brother.
Heroic and Mythic are doing better.
Maybe.
A very rough estimate of characters who have killed Tergru on normal is between 10 and 13% of the active endgame character count. On Heroic, that shrinks to between 8 and 10%, and if we correct for alts, that means that somewhere between 15 and 20% of the player's rate.
This is a number that is completely made up. There is no way to actually calculate or even have approximate numbers, so to speak, about the amount of players currently raiding. You have no way to calculate the total player base. As such, you don't have a way.
Well, it's kind of true. You can guess, right? You can guess about the size of a normal and heroic raid. So you can guess.
Try to calculate how many players are raiding. You can have an average number of raiders.
Also, he didn't compare players, he compared number of characters that killed it, but that's a small point.
Kills that show up, and even then you wouldn't be able to have the correct number because you're lacking China. So even if you did,
China doesn't matter. Don't ever let someone tell you. If you don't have the numbers for it, then we can't really do much with it, can we?
That still wouldn't work. The only Chinese guilds getting logged would be manual additions, top kills additions, big ones like getting curve or getting mythic kills. All the Zwades of heroic middling guilds very often would go missing, and on top of that you still wouldn't have a way to track the normal, the so to speak casual Chinese players that don't show up anywhere. They aren't tracked by
China
anything.
doesn't.
So these numbers are
China's not a factor in this calculation.
If a whole 1 million of them have not done Mythic Plus, then there are 2 possible options. Number 1, loads of those characters are alts and haven't done M Plus yet. That's the easiest option, and it does cut the projected player count down substantially, kind of lining up with our earlier suggestions. 2, they are unique players, but don't actually do Mythic Plus. Now, since Mythic Plus is one of the 3 activities to do in Endgame World of Warcraft, and also does provide the best, easiest source of gear for most, that doesn't bode well for the game.
Why? even in the cases where there could be a possible normal explanation where a player simply decides not to go into one of the possible activities, it is being twisted in a wow, bad, negative way, trying to pull
Okay,
it.
so either Mythic Plus, it could be that people aren't doing Mythic Plus because they don't like the seasonal affix this tier, or they got burnt out of it last year, I guess. But if that's one of the three things you do at end game, I mean, a drop off in that is significant, right? You're just saying that people aren't raiding, people aren't doing Mythic Plus. They're just what, sitting in Orbos, jumping on their tree mount. What are they doing?
Out as a negative thing. You just went through pointing out with fake numbers that barely 20.
The numbers aren't fake. The numbers are real. You just disagree with the conclusions. Izen, you need to work on your presentation of information, because now you're the one who's wrong, or I guess, as you put it, lying, because you're saying that the numbers are fake, but they're not fake. They're real numbers that have real statistics behind them. You just disagree with the conclusions and the reasoning behind those conclusions. Not that the numbers are fake.
20% of the player base even raids, and yet now pointing out that people simply might choose not to do Mythic Plus, you're trying to twist it into a bad thing. It is a common thing, in fact, that many people would rather not get into Mythic Plus or don't enjoy Mythic Plus.
But okay, source, hello, source. Like, you can't just say that without proof. So if you want to counter Bellular's point, that's fine. You can give other options like I just did, but you can't say that it's a common thing that people aren't wanting to get into Mythic Plus more so than 9.0. Like, you need to source that, or you need to like prove that in some way. You haven't done that.
Not trying to rush or get item level from that type of activity. There is nothing wrong about it, and it doesn't bode badly for the game.
Well, no, because people, of course, more people are going to do it when you're trying to get of course, more people are going to do it when they're trying to get gear. But if you look, I don't know if he's going to show the chart later, but if you look at the chart drops off at a faster rate than is expected from previous patches and from 9.0. So Bellular's argument is that the curve or the steepness of that line is significantly worse than it would expected to be, which I think is a perfectly valid argument, but you haven't attacked that argument. You've just said, yeah, people aren't doing it because they don't need the gear. Yeah, that's already accounted for in the line, and Bellular talks about that. You just avoided that topic entirely.
It's perfectly reasonable to expect players to not enjoy several activities tailored for the end game. There is nothing wrong, and more importantly, it's not news. It's not.
No, it is news because it's unexpected. It's not following previous trends. That's why it's valuable information. That's why the data matters.
Debating about.
What about engagement in the Mythic Plus system? Well, thanks to Best Keystone, we can actually track that via completed run.
Not to mention, Mythic Plus is one of the esports in WoW. So they have the Great Push now, and they also have MDI. So it is one of the major contents of the game.
No, you can't, because Best Keystone doesn't have a special secret recipe where they can track Chinese players. So no, that is also...
No, bro, I want you to think really, really, really hard about why in your head the number of Chinese players is going to matter that much for these statistics. Let's pretend that no one in China at all has quit the game. And in fact, more people have joined the game. Is it still not a problem that this many people across every other region is falling off? Does that not bode poorly for World of Warcraft? Do you think that's not a problem? Think about that.
Another site that will not be able to track the Chinese player base either.
So here's a look at the 3 most recent seasons.
Yeah, so he does show it. So this is why it's so concerning, right? So if you have Season 4, which by the same argument should have less people doing it than Season 2 of Shadowlands, right? So Battle for Azeroth Season 4 should have less people doing it than Shadowlands Season 2 because it's later in the expansion, so less people are going to be in the game because people always fall off throughout the expansion, and people don't need the gear because this is Season 4. This is like at the end of the game. They've already gone through multiple tiers, so it's the same reason he gave here. People have already gone through Season 1 tier. They don't need the gear as much, so they're going to do it less. But look at the curve here. So what you saw for Season 4 BFA is almost the exact same shape of line here, except look how much different this number is. That is, let's see, this is just below 1 million at the peak, and this is just below 750,000. So this is a little bit less than 250,000 drop right here, and this is about a 250,000 drop right here. So about 250,000 less mythic plus completions here, and then it pretty much trends equally down following this blue line. Now Shadowlands is of course unique, as was mentioned. They do it for the gear, but this is interesting. It doesn't necessarily follow these same curves. You see, it has these huge spikes, and I believe that these huge spikes are due to the like mild popularity of MDI, and then later the continuation of this down here is the popularity that the Great Push had, and the fact that this is becoming a major way for streamers of World of Warcraft to engage their community and to continue, you know, playing the game popularly. I think that this has gained a lot of traction, this expansion, except for now it's fallen off. So it's like season 1, it had this huge growth, and then season 2, it just fell off a cliff. That's the reason that this graph is important. So of course, less people need it. And the reason that you have less people at the beginning doing this is because it's harder to get into those keys, right? You need gear at first, and now you have the gear, so you should be doing them more. But it does follow a similar curve. It's just way less. It's way less. It's almost a fourth less, right? So that's the important takeaway from this.
It's early days, but the lower starting point...
And it's a fourth less from BFA Season 4, which most people considered a pretty bad expansion, right?
9.1 is instantly apparent.
Okay, ring the bells, because this one is actually mostly correct. The number of runs, at least, sure, excluding China, the number of runs is correct. Season 1 started pretty high, started dropping as expected, and then Season 2 started at a lower level than, you know, before. That's mostly correct.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, my point in this video is the same point I made related to the investor call that Blizzard had, which was my question to you about having 26 million monthly active users. If you exclude dead games that really rack up barely any users at all, like Heroes of the Storm.
Okay, source that, brother. Source that, please. But look, 26 million, bro. That's equal here. So you think that this 40 whatever million came from all of Hearthstone, all of Overwatch, all of Diablo, all of Heroes of the Storm, and then all 3 of those games just all died, and WoW is the only one left standing? You have any idea how much more unlikely that is, the scenario where all of them are declining equally or like close to equally? Why do you think that those games are declining more? You need to give me like evidence of that if you're going to make that claim.
Diablo 3, older games like Warcraft 3 and the Reforged version. What you have left basically is Hearthstone, it's Overwatch, and it's World of Warcraft, both classic and retail.
Yeah,
so,
again, yeah, and then there's classic now too. So you have a fourth thing there too. Bro, come on, man. That's so much more that there should be people engaging with.
Even assuming, even implying the little...
And monthly active users, if you sign in to retail and then sign into classic, you count as 2. So that's a big thing.
Blizzard does to inflate the active users, meaning that if you play Hearthstone and Overwatch at the same time, you will count as 2 active users, right? So it's gonna make it look like there is more people. Even if you cut down this 26 million number, because of course some people will be playing multiple Blizzard games at the same time, even if you cut it down to something like 18 million, okay? Fine, okay. You have 18 million players to split.
18 million. I think that's a pretty big estimate considering how, like, let me know. Do you only play one Blizzard game? When I played World of Warcraft, I signed into Classic and Retail each at least once a month, right? So I would have counted as 2 monthly active users there. Let me know, do you guys only play one Blizzard game and that's it? Or do you play other Blizzard games as well?
Between WoW, Overwatch, and Hearthstone, 18 million players. Based on all of the reasonable reports we have gotten, Hearthstone is the least played of the games.
How do you know?
Overwatch is in the middle.
How do you know?
And WoW is at the top. And you
Prove
have
it.
18 million players to split.
You didn't put any. So where Bellular put actual like statistics on the screen to prove his point, you haven't done anything. I mean, you did statistics to prove that Mythic hasn't really fallen off. Fine, I grant you Mythic clear rate is looking better than expected or better than last year at least, but you haven't proven that Overwatch is a mid-tier played game and that Hearthstone is a low-tier played game, you're gonna have to prove those to me.
Do you split them? Either way, if you try to go to this call that he's trying to make, which is that at best, at an optimistic level, WoW has 2 million active subscribers, you have 24 million monthly active users left to give out. And almost everything we have seen in this video is speculation. The only true thing, the only actual real number is 26 million monthly active users. So how do you split
Yeah, those other numbers, of course, are guesswork, yes. But that's already stated by Bellular.
that true number? So once you try to claim that WoW has 2 million active, how do you split 24 million monthly active users to Hearthstone, Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, and Diablo 3, and StarCraft 2? 24 million people. And as
and WoW Classic, right? Because WoW Classic isn't included in all those numbers he stated, right? And I'm willing to bet WoW Classic counts as a large number of players for Blizzard.
even if you shrink it down, because someone playing WoW is also playing Hearthstone, someone playing Overwatch is also playing Diablo 3.
And
so
WoW
the
Classic,
actual number isn't going to be 26
which has probably got
million,
more
it's gonna be
players.
18, 17, maybe even 16. You still have those millions of players to split amongst all of Blizzard games. And if you try to point out that WoW has 2 million players, how do you split the rest? If the 26 million real number is 16, you take away 2 from WoW, you have 14 left. You're trying to tell me that there is 10 million players playing Overwatch and 4 million players playing Hearthstone? That is the main issue I have.
No, I think so. Okay, so I wish you would show the chart that Bellular put up, but okay, so I'm pretty sure that Bellular did give like a upper and lower bound of estimation. So let's go ahead and guess here. So let's say you have 2 million on the lower end of possible monthly active users for World of Warcraft. And then let's say that most of them play the other games too. Most of them play WoW Classic, Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone, and Overwatch. Okay, so those 2 million people for WoW count as 8 million people for all those other games. So they count as 10 million people altogether. Is it possible that Hearthstone, Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, and WoW Classic all have unique players as well? Of course. And that those unique players also play all those other games but don't play retail as well? Of course. So let's say you have like 1 million people who play WoW Classic but don't play retail. And those 1 million people also play all of the other games too. So now they count as 3 million for those other games and then 1 million for Classic. So they're 4 million total. So now we're at 14 million. And then let's say like you just keep doing this for the other games. You can see where you might have a world where people playing multiple games kind of adds up really quickly, because you have people playing multiple versions of World of Warcraft, or people who play World of Warcraft also play Overwatch and Hearthstone and Heroes, or people who play Heroes also play Hearthstone, or people who play Hearthstone also play Overwatch. Like you have all these people who can count as up to 5 users. WoW Retail, WoW Classic, Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone, Overwatch. So one person can at most count as 5 monthly active users, and then one person and at least count as 1 million monthly active users. Okay. So, I mean, of course, I don't think that there's only 2 million monthly active users in World of Warcraft. I think that was the lower end of his guesstimate. And monthly active users probably count somewhere in between those numbers, right? It's unlikely that most of those people only play one game, because that's part of the advertising and retention strategy for Blizzard and Activision Blizzard, is to keep people in their game system, only playing their games. That gives them more money, obviously. I find it hard to believe that people count only as one active user, and they probably count for a much, much higher count, like maybe anywhere from 2 to 4, I would guess. I'm just speculating here as well, but you get how this can kind of snowball pretty quickly into not that many people accounting for that large number. Those are some of the points that we should consider here. And yes, of course, the 2 million number is exceedingly low, but just based on the numbers he did, he showed you how he came to those numbers. I don't think it's not like he's shilling or he's like he's not trying to lie to people. He's just showing how he came to these numbers and stuff. So
this type of speculation, that amongst all of these possible theorized numbers, these calculations, the real thing we have is the monthly active users, and you have to find a way to split them in all of Blizzard's games.
No, because they can count for multiple people, right? So it's not like you have to find a way to like split them between each game, like I said, there could be unique people for each game, but then there could also be a lot of people who play other games simultaneously. Like, do you think it's that big of a stretch to say that between Hearthstone and Overwatch, there are 10 million unique people across those two games? Is that a huge stretch in your mind? What about 15 million, you know? Like, so it could be that there are just a ton of people in Hearthstone. Again, he didn't really give me any statistics to where he claimed that Hearthstone's like a dead game. Like, I've never heard that, but maybe. So I don't know.
Kind of becomes difficult, because if you point out that WoW is dying, that Hearthstone is dying, that Overwatch is dying, and then of course StarCraft, Heroes of the Storm, and Diablo are already dead. I mean, those 26...
Wait, I forgot about StarCraft this whole time. That's another game. You have StarCraft. Holy fuck. Dude. So between Hearthstone, StarCraft 2, Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, WoW Classic, these 5 games are separate from WoW Retail, and you're telling me that all 5 of these games all declined while WoW didn't, or that they're the main reasons for that 20 million drop off? All 5 of these games died? I forgot about StarCraft. Oh no.
6 million users have to go somewhere. Where are they all at? Warcraft 3 Reforged? Where are they playing at? That's
no, between those 5 games. They're playing between those 5 games. That's where.
I was particularly triggered.
Is it possible that you think it's possible that there's 24 million people between those 5 games that don't also play WoW Retail? Is that possible in your mind? Maybe. What about I want to see Bellular's upper end so I can, use that too.
Going to PV, a domain that is certainly not his, and he was clearly clueless about.
How is he? Dude, you can't be, just because you could literally know nothing about World of Warcraft. You could have never seen World of Warcraft in your life, and that wouldn't preclude you from understanding these numbers.
So I had to point out and fix a few of the wrong statements, particularly related to the kills.
But you didn't correct anything.
I do.
You didn't correct anything, bro.
Went over his head, trying to pass.
He went over your head.
Raiding progression as if it's something that actually matters within raiding, and deciding to complete.
Okay, I don't know what he means that matters within raiding. Most people clear normal. There's more people clearing normal than any other difficulty of the raid, except for maybe LFR.
Ignore mythic and heroic raiding, which is where you see the actual progression and the actual participation.
Yeah, but that's not the number of people, dude. I feel like you're so confused, bro. I'm sorry.
Players is in and of itself biased. It means there is an agenda behind the entire video. You can't possibly try to make a video.
It doesn't feel like there's an agenda. This is so dramatic.
10 minutes about raiding and basically never once mention mythic, and only once mention heroic, only briefly touching on people that curve, and even then the numbers.
No, it wasn't wrong though. It wasn't wrong. You didn't even put the chart, dude. I wish you put the chart. The chart was gold. Go watch Bellular's video. 2 million's the low end. He has the upper end. Of course, they're just estimations, but I think they're probably pretty close, somewhere in between those 2 estimations. Go watch his video.
Misleading. So very little respect for people who do this type of thing just to farm dissent, farm malcontent, and people
It's so dramatic. This is so dramatic, dude.
Angry or dissatisfied about the situation of the state of the game. Trust me, I am dissatisfied myself. I am trying to make as best as I can, roughly 1 video every day related to WoW.
So you hate the game, and the only reason you're still playing it is because it's how you make your money. Bro, so can you not understand why people who don't make money from this game just want to leave? I don't know.
So I would be first in line, being annoyed about the lack of content, about the wrong things that Blizzard did, and I have done my fair share in criticizing Blizzard, but only when I know what I'm talking about, and only when I actually do and take part in the content.
You don't have to take part in the content to understand numbers, dude.
Better think of a few ways that the content could be improved, or where did the content go wrong. I don't just go up and make a video shouting "wow, bad" to get some few pats on the back.
I don't think that's what Bellular did, but
players
maybe.
Who are just looking to find people similar to them to share their anger with. That's not something I care about. So this was it for today. This was it for this triggered
Oh,
video.
I didn't even go over the PvP, bro. okay, think about it. Also, Bellular goes over PvP as well. To show you, he links all these things together to show you that there probably is a drop off in players. And lo and behold, all three of those statistics, rating, Mythic Plus, and PvP, all show a similar drop in trend, which again lends more power to the possibility that there is such a large drop off in players. But yeah, that's the end of his video. So I think that's all I'm going to say about the video. I don't wish any ill will towards this guy. Of course, I think he just got caught up in the heat of the moment, thought he had some good points, but I hope I had demonstrated that they had their own flaws and possibly weren't as articulated or as thought out as Bellular's video. So if you liked it and you enjoyed it and you made it to this point in the video, come on, drop a subscribe and then also drop a like on the video. But yeah, that's it. Peace.